Steve, it's a great thrill to come here because it reminds me very much of when, as a tiny kid, I went to Standard House in '71 and knocked on the door, and that was LAT. It was everything that your grandfather had started. At the time, of course, it was Motor News and Motorsport magazine, and then everything was under one roof, and I could see Laurie Morton, I could see your dad, and I could see Mike Dudson. They're all there, and it's a little bit like that now. We've got everything under one roof here.
Absolutely, it's exactly like that. And it's nice to have it back like that.
And how big is LAT now compared with that? How much has it grown since that time?
It's grown a lot since then. We bought a lot of archives during the Haymarket time. Principally the Autocar and Motor archive, which has given us the depth of time, if you like. So we go back now to 1895 with our first image, road car.
Wow.
To 1906 for the first racing shot, French Grand Prix. So and all the way through to last week's Australian Grand Prix. So it's a complete set from 1906 to 2017.
We were just looking at that lovely shot of Fangio at Rouen, right? And that's in the four-wheel drift from the 250F. It's one of the all-time classic photographs.
My dad took that. Yeah, and he deliberately shot it wide because he wanted everyone to be able to see where he'd come from and where he was going to. Otherwise, you wouldn't get the perspective of it, would you? And he told me that there's on the other side of the road from there was like quite a big cliff dropping down. So Fangio was sliding at, I don't know how fast he was going, probably 100 miles an hour or something.
Yeah,
four-wheel drift, with no barriers, obviously, in those days. So he knew what he was doing, that guy.
And your father knew what he was doing. He was, as you say, he got the right perspective on everything. But he's very near to the track as well, right?
Yeah. He said that racing drivers knew their limits and photographers knew theirs, but they were very close to one another, the limits.
What is it like today? How many cameramen, how many photographers do you have at a Grand Prix?
The last Grand Prix, it varies depending on the race. But the first race of the season's just gone. Australia, we had seven people shooting there and a technician.
So how many images is that then?
About thousands, get shot now because it's digital. And we can now shoot. You can shoot a picture and you can send it straight back from the back of the camera. So there's stuff going through all the time.
And obviously it wasn't like that in the old days. That's only really been in the past sort of decade or two.
Yeah, I mean only in the last 3 or 4 years have we been able to sort of transmit from the cameras because that's all down to mobile phone technology. But before that we were shooting film, and you'd be sending films back during the course of the weekend. So the Motoring News, for instance, which was always on deadline on a Monday, if you were in a Grand Prix in Brazil or something, you'd have to send stuff back from practice, so they had some colour pictures that they could use.
I remember it well. Wet race and all the pictures.
All the pictures, beautiful sunny blue skies. Yeah, exactly. From the first practice session.
But do you think that in the days when you didn't have so much ability to snap away with digital photography and you only had 3 rolls of film, do you think the art was a different art? Or a great photographer is a great photographer regardless?
I think you're right in some ways, but in other ways you were a lot more repetitive back then because you weren't seeing what you were doing. You tended to go back and do similar stuff again.
Interesting point.
Whereas now it's a little bit like it's obviously like in the old days if you'd been able to Polaroid stuff, so you'd see exactly what you were getting. You think the light's great there, that's great. Okay, I've done that, I can move on.
Yeah.
So with digital photography, because you're seeing it as you go along, you know when you've nailed it and you move on to the next shot.
What's the best circuit at the moment, Formula One circuit, do you think, for photography?
Well, there's lots of different ones. I mean, Singapore's great. It's a real challenge to shoot under the lights, etc. Monaco is probably the easiest to get great
despite the
pictures.
advent of all the fences and obviously restricted areas now, there's still points you can get.
You can still find ways around it. All the new circuits, obviously, they have to have the fences to a certain level when they're built. So someone like Azerbaijan could be so much better if it wasn't covered in fences because there's lots of great backgrounds. But you can work around it. We get what we want, so it works. It's a collaboration.
Well, now this beautifully minimalist, clean. I'm afraid to eat or drink anything here. It's so perfect. A cafeteria area, for want of a better word, water cooler area. They probably call it in the States, where it's a nice place to chill out and relax. But I'm interested to know with you, Johnny, how you drive your life, if that's the right word, because you have this requirement, I guess, to produce news stories all the time. And how difficult or easy is that on an ongoing basis?
I think it's just understanding the flow. Readers, they want to wake up in the morning with a nice, good juicy F1 story, which then sets the day, and you have a peak at lunchtime and then end of day. And I think it's going with the flow. Some days will be manic. I remember the day Nico Rosberg shocked us announcing that retirement in Vienna.
You didn't predict doom?
No, unfortunately not. So days like that, and there are other days where it's quieter, so maybe, let's do some analysis today. Let's look at how the Australian Grand Prix panned out. Let's look at where a Red Bull at. There's always content to talk about, and that's what makes F1 such a fantastic.
So how many
sport.
stories do you personally produce a week? Would you say?
I'd say it's 3 to 4 a day.
Wow.
Basically. So and some of them vary. Some will just be a comment piece from Toto Wolff or Lewis Hamilton or Sebastian Vettel. Others will be more in-depth analysis. Or we'll do some tech stuff. Mix and match. But F1's got so many different levels.
Yeah,
never
exactly.
short of stuff to talk about.
And you've just got back from Melbourne, obviously. Yep. And what was your? I mean, there was an interesting theme there, wasn't there? A lot of cars didn't get it right for Melbourne, and I know that's something that you were looking at even before the race.
Yeah, we came out of testing, and James Key, the Toro Rosso technical director, just remember this one comment from him. He says these cars are very sensitive to setup change. Well, this is quite interesting. So I thought, this theme about bringing your A game all the time was borne out. Ferrari got lost on balance on Friday. Red Bull in and out the window. Then in the race, we saw Lewis wasn't so comfortable with that car, and that dictated that stop that cost him the win. I think all the teams are now realising you've got to be so spot on now with these cars, so precise, like the drivers with the setup. And I think it's fantastic because it's no longer turn up, manage the tyres a little bit, and you're away. You've got to get it sorted.
And how do you see the Ferrari-Mercedes balance right now?
Super tight. I mean, you speak to some people, they say, "Oh, Ferrari have got a quicker car than the Merc," and other people say, "No, Merc is still ahead." But I think all we can say is it's really, really close, fantastically close. And if either side, messes up, that can be the difference in winning and losing. And I love a Grand Prix where you walk away and you can say, if this happened, this guy won. If they hadn't done this, this guy won.
Well, let me ask you this question: if Lewis hadn't lost the lead in his pit stop and he'd come out ahead of Seb for whatever reason, hadn't had Max, do you think he would have won the race?
Pretty much so. I think Melbourne is such a difficult place to overtake. Seb was trying really hard in that early phase to shadow him, get in the DRS and get past. I don't think there was a way past. I think it was quite interesting. Lewis was 1.5 to 2 seconds quicker than Max just after the stop. Still no way past. So it all swung on less than 1 second at that pit stop.
Yeah,
great
amazing
race.
Tell us about your life. How much time do you spend away from home in a year?
A lot. So it's every 2 weeks or back-to-backs, constant on the road, and you just get into a cycle of going to races, building up, covering the weekend, analysing that weekend, and switching forwards to the next. So not much time at home.
Give us some numbers then. How many days are you away, do you reckon?
Well, if it's 20 races and each
times
day
what, 4 days?
4 or 5 days. So
wow.
It's over 100 days plus travel, plus the Macau Grand Prix as well. I chuck in as well because it's just a great event.
And what do you do at Macau?
Well, I do a bit for the help out the organisers a bit.
Good for you.
And
it is a brilliant race, isn't it?
Fantastic race, and it's just
We've got to show that on Motorsport TV.
Great opportunity to meet these kids on the way up, because F1 takes up all my time, and rarely get a chance to go and see a Formula 3 race or Formula 4 race, or go and spend time in the GP2 Formula 2 paddock. So you get to meet these guys and meet them before they're spoiled by F1. So all of them.
How much of your contact is through the PR aspect of a Formula 1 team, and how do you ever just contact drivers directly if you want to get a quote or talk to them, or even team principals? The people the PR departments are supposed to protect.
I think a lot of it nowadays is, it used to be that 100% go to team bosses and go to drivers, and PRs wouldn't be very involved. Now it's swung back. PRs take up a lot of time, and you need the cooperation from the teams to get stories and access and stuff. So you can't really go behind the PR's back and get your interview and stuff, because it'll just cut down the next route. So I think it's just it's a balancing act that sometimes you've got to go through the official channels and get your interviews, but with team bosses and stuff, they're always available in the paddock, and you can stop drivers in the paddock. So which is another part of the weekend that's great fun, isn't it? That Thursday, particularly when they're all around. Oh, days when there's kind of gossip bubbling in the paddock and all that sort of. I remember one of my favourite mornings in the paddock was walking down to the Monaco Grand Prix on race day a few years ago, and someone phoned me up, said, "You need to chase a story about Mercedes have breached the sporting regs. I'm not telling you anymore." Phone down, so did some sniffing around, and it was all about the private secret test done at Barcelona. It all erupted, and it was just a great morning of people running between motorhomes and other journalists chasing it, and fantastic.